In today's video, I'll be sharing how to make these really easy flower coasters in crochet. For this tutorial, I'm working with I Love This Cotton yarn with a 5mm hook. Now the label does suggest 5.5mm, but I just found that this was more comfortable for me. I'm going to go ahead and add a timestamp here for the beginning of the pattern, but I do want to share a really important tip before we start the center of the flower. When you're working a circle in crochet or working in a spiral, you have to create increases, and you do that by adding 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And what naturally happens is it creates a little point, which is ideal when you're working on a hexagon or an octagon pattern. But when you're working in a spiral, it does make it very noticeable where you've added your increases. Now there's a really easy fix to this, and I'm going to be sharing how to do it in the video. Basically, we're just going to be alternating where we add those increases, but I wanted to make you aware of it before we get started so it's not too confusing. I'm going to be writing the sequence or having it written at the top of the video while I'm working, but I'm going to be working slightly different from the sequence at times. Using a 5mm hook with this yarn weight, these came out to about 5.5 inches in diameter. To begin, we're going to make a magic circle. If you don't like doing magic circles, you can do a chain 4 with a slip stitch into that very first chain to form a circle. Wrap the yarn around your fingers, making sure the tail is in the palm of your hand. Within the circle, pull your yarn through and create a chain. The chain here is not going to serve as a stitch, it's just there to anchor things in place. Now we're going to do 6 single crochets within this center. Going in, pull your yarn through, yarn over, pull through both loops, single crochet, 5 more. Go ahead and pull on the tail to close. And now it's time for us to begin increasing and forming our circle. I like to use a stitch marker in the last stitch that I did, but you may prefer adding it to the very front or taking a piece of yarn and going into the center. It's completely up to you. We just completed 6 single crochets, and now we want to make that 6 into 12. So we're going to do an increase in each stitch around. Working into that first stitch, add 2 single crochets, all the way around. Coming to the last stitch, double check that you have 12 single crochets, and then you're ready for round 3. So to begin our sequence with round 3, we're going to do 1 single crochet with an increase. 1 single crochet, increase in the next stitch. That just means 2 single crochets in the next stitch. 1 single crochet, increase. Continue this all the way around. 2 single crochets for our final increase. You should have 18 stitches. For round 4, we're going to do 2 single crochets with an increase, and that's going to take us from 18 to 24. You can either follow along with the text above, doing 2 single crochets and then an increase, or you can follow along with me where I'm going to swap it around and do an increase first and then my 2 single crochets. This is what's going to give you a really nice round shape. Increase, 2 single crochets. Increase, 2 single crochets. And double check that you have 24 stitches, and then you're ready for the next round. For round 5, we're going to do another increase. Instead of 2 single crochets, we're going to do 3 single crochets with an increase. Now I'm going to go back to doing the individual single crochets before I do the increase. Again, this is just helping us get those increases in different spots of our circle to help us avoid getting that octagon or hexagon look. 1, 2, 3, increase. Finishing with an increase, and you should have 30 single crochets at this point. For round 6, it's time to switch colors, and you have a couple of options here. If you just want to work with 2 colors, go ahead and get ready with your petal color now. But if you want to add an outline color like I did here, go ahead and choose that now. I'll go ahead and show you how to do the outline color. It would be the same for the petal color or the outline color. Just pull back to where you have 2 remaining loops left on your hook from the previous stitch. Now just wrap the yarn around your hook and pull it through to complete that final stitch and bring in your new color. I like to snip off the previous color, and then that way I can tie these ends together just to help me out a little bit here. I don't double knot, I just do it to anchor it down. And now you're ready to do single crochets all the way around. If you're working with one color for the petal and you didn't do the outline, just go ahead and add a stitch marker into the very last stitch that you made for that round. Once you've gone all the way around, you can do a slip stitch into that final stitch and fasten off. Or what I like to do to kind of eliminate that knot is do an invisible join. All I'm doing here is just trying to avoid that knot at the top, just make it a little bit less noticeable. So taking the tail, I'm going to go into the back and under both of those 2 stitches, that V there, and then come in at the front of that very first V and tighten. Just double check that you have 30 stitches all the way around when you do this. And then just weave that into the back. Now for round 7, we're going to be creating 30 single crochets again, but we're also incorporating a chain 2 along with that, which is going to be our spaces for our petals. So to begin, I'm going to do a slip knot onto my hook, and I'm going to create a standing single crochet. Going into any stitch, go into the stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through both loops, and we have a standing single crochet. To incorporate our chain 2s, we're going to do it after every 5th single crochet. So at this point, go ahead and do 2 more. This will give us 3 single crochets. If you didn't do an outline color, it's the same thing. Just continue on now with 3 single crochets. Chain 2, this is going to be our first little gap for our petals. We're going to go back into the next stitch and we're going to do 5 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Chain 2. In the next stitch, single crochet, and 4 more to complete our 5. Continue doing this all the way around. Chain 2, back down to do our 5 single crochets. So 1, 2, and as you can see, that gives us our 5 single crochets. When we reach this point, we're going to do a slip stitch to finish. But do not fasten off. At this point, you should have 6 spaces to create your petals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. To create our petals, it's super easy. We're just going to be creating 10 treble crochets in each of those spaces. Here we go. Wrap the yarn over twice. We're getting ready to do our first treble. Going into the space that we created with a chain 2, go through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Let's do another. Yarn over twice, going into the space, pull your yarn through, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2. Okay, we've got 8 more. Again, the trick here is just maintaining that tension to make sure that they stay nice and tight. You don't want to pull too tightly, but you just want to be aware of what you're doing. Otherwise, these little wraps will get a little loosey-goosey on you. One more. To anchor your petal down, you're going to do a slip stitch into the 3rd stitch. I find it easiest just to look at these single crochets, 1, 2, 3, and work the stitch above it. It's going to lean a little bit to the right, looking more like a letter P. That's when you know you're in the right spot. The top of this stitch is actually right here, so be careful with that. So just go 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, and go right above towards the right and do a slip stitch. Now 10 more trebles. And then going into the 3rd stitch, 1, 2, 3, there it is. Do a slip stitch. And now you're just going to continue this all the way around. Phew, did you make it through all of those trebles? That was a lot. Okay, so when you're finished with all of your petals, it's time to fasten off, and we're going to do a slip stitch into the same stitch that we began. So 1, 2, 3, working in. I just tuck it in there, pull the yarn through, and slip stitch. You can either thread this through to create a knot, or you can just do it this way and then feed it into the back and tighten. I do it this way just to kind of hide that knot a little bit more. And now the fun part of weaving in all the ends. At this point, you can stiffen your coasters if you like. I think liquid starch works really well for this. Just dip it into the liquid and then just squeeze it to get all of the excess out of it, and then leave it to dry. I like to use wax paper. Just be aware that if you decide to wash these, you will need to do this process again to get them stiff again. If you want something a little bit more permanent, then I would recommend a water and glue mixture. If you'd like to see a video on how to stiffen yarn, be sure to let me know and I'll work on that. I do hope you enjoyed the video. Likes are always appreciated, and we will see you next time.